Tristen Newton was robbed. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could come around the corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Well, did the Big East get Player of the Year right? I repeat, Tristen Newton got robbed. The last time a Big East Player of the Year came from a team that did not finish in the top half of the league was 1999-2000. I was a freshman in college. Troy Murphy won for Notre Dame, and they finished 7th. Talk me off the ledge, Tyler. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. I'm not going to be able to talk you off the ledge because I'm there with you. Tristen Newton got robbed. I mean, my frustration with this is, as Big East has set a precedent that the best player on the best team is going to get the award. I love Tyler Kolek. We have been lucky enough to get to know Tyler Kolek. He averaged 12-7 last year and was widely accepted as the best player in the Big East because he was on the best team. This UConn team might be the best team to ever play Big East basketball, 18-2 in conference. And you don't give it to a player on the UConn Huskies when you have maybe two players that were deserving as well. Cam Spencer's a borderline 40, 50, 90 guy. You're talking about one of the, or 50, 40, 90. You're just talking about one of the best teams ever. And to not put him in the history books, Tristen Newton, I think it's kind of disgraceful. I love Devin Carter. And that's not, it's not a shot at Devin Carter. It's just, I think that Newton deserved it.
No, and with respect to Kolek and respect to Carter, I mean, you're 100% right. Even if you didn't go Tristen Newton, I actually wouldn't have been okay with someone like Bailey Shireman, because Tyler was hurt the last couple games, so he really didn't kind of get to affect the end of their season. I would go with Baylor because if you said you can't pick a UConn player, that's who I would have went with. And mostly because I feel like he makes Creighton elite on a certain amount of level where he can get his own shot, and they don't really have another guy like him. So I think that and on top of it, he's just been balling. But yeah, I mean, the whole like finishing 7th and getting the Player of the Year, it's not like Devin Carter averaged a triple-double for the season. It wasn't this exceptional statistical. If you wanted to go there, you could have went to Cam Spencer, who not only was 40, 50, 40, 90, like you mentioned, but is the first player in college basketball history to have a 3-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio in that club. So it's a little crazy to me. Do you think it motivates UConn more though? I feel like there's an era of that.
I mean, one of the crazy things about this UConn Huskies year is coming off a national championship, you expect a hangover. Now you're talking about coming off a national championship, losing to Adama Sanogo, Jordan Hawkins, Joey Calcaterra, and Andre Jackson Jr. I mean, how does this team not have a hangover? Whatever Dan Hurley is doing to motivate them, I'm sure that this might be hanging in Tristen Newton's locker. Maybe a nice picture of Devin Carter will be just hanging there for him. To remind him, I think Dan Hurley right now is very happy to know that his team will be motivated. I don't want to pivot at all, but my question for this whole thing is, why did Tristen Newton not get most improved player then? If you're not going to give him Player of the Year, why doesn't he get most improved player? This guy was, you're a UConn fan, borderline unplayable at times. The point guard was the conversation, and now he's a point guard for a national champion team and first team all Big East, but he still doesn't get it.
Yeah, I that's a great sentiment. And didn't he win? And I know it's not, there's multiple levels of first team All-American. Didn't he win Sporting News first team All-American?
Yep.
So he's on the first team All-American for the Sporting News, but he's not the Player of the Year in his conference. It's just, I wish we had someone to make it make sense. What's that line from Philadelphia with Denzel Washington? Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. You know what I mean? Like I don't get it. And you're right. There have been times where I've been just like, oh, Tristan, you know what I mean? Like when you're just frustrated with him as a fan, but it's few and far between this year. I don't even think maybe there's a fleeting moment where I felt that way, but yeah, you're right. I mean, he's improved a ton. He's realized his role on this team is to get people involved and to score when it's necessary. So Yeah, I'm at a loss. But I put out another like a YouTube short the other day about how about Alex Caravan? Like where is the respect for him? There are so many guys in this team, but another 50, 40, 90 guy. Like tell me how you felt about that. Like was there a good did someone give you a good answer about that? I have no clue.
For me, maybe it was just expectation because I'm looking at his stats right now. Caravan shot last year. I would have swore on my life that Alex Caravan shot 5 percentage points higher last year than he did this year, and 40.2 to 40.1%. So maybe the expectations were really high for Caravan, and I mean, you look at his stats, he might have exceeded them. 9 points to 14 points a game. Shooting same level from three while shooting a higher volume from three. Yeah, listen, hey, if you had to pick defensive player of the year, I was on a podcast recently, I said Donovan Clingan. I mean, UConn the balance almost hurt them in so many ways. You know, Castle gets the award, but I would have loved to see Caravan get even an honorable mention. 14 points a game and 50, 40, 90 is no joke.
Yeah, no, that's where I landed. The minimum they could have done him justice is by giving him an honorable mention, because just give him some recognition. This kid's a gamer. He's a guy that not one Big East coach would turn down to have on their team. Not one. To a man, they'd all be like, yes, give us Alex Caravan, because he affects winning in so many ways. So that to me is more of a travesty than Tristen Newton being robbed. And I'm going to keep beating that Alex Caravan drum. And also, I'm going to keep saying that until YouTube picks up my subtitles and doesn't call him Alex Caravan. So every time I see those YouTube shorts, it's like, let's talk about Alex Caravan. It cracks me up. But as I kind of mentioned this before, you got to think that Dan Hurley is using this. You mentioned this, like putting Devin Carter's picture in Tristan's locker, almost like Rocky IV style, where, you know, he's holding that Drago picture and, you know, crumples it up. I don't think Tristan is built that way. Like, it's not any disrespect to him. I almost think he doesn't care. But there's got to be some button to push to make him feel this and make him realize why this is important.
Yeah, I mean, Tristan, from everything we've heard about Tristan, he seems like a very quiet, you know, lead by example type of guy. We talked to him at Media Day, and he talked a lot about how he wanted his leadership to step up in terms, you know, that was what NBA teams had told him, that he wanted to see his leadership step up. So you're right. I don't think you'll hear Tristan Newton say anything outwardly about this. I think you might hear Hurley say something about it. But if they win another national championship, you know, Tristan Newton has that great quote last year. I don't care if you call me a point guard, just call me a national champion. And, you know, he hears it. Like, that's what Tristan Newton hears everything that's being said. Just because he's quiet doesn't mean that he's not hearing it.
No, I agree. And I just think it's more fuel to the fire. Well, we're going to get into more of this in the second segment, and also talk about Big East eras. Let's compare Big East eras. There's been a lot of iterations of the Big East from its, you know, the OG start to post UConn leaving for the AAC to now their return. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts in particular and put a UConn spin on it right after this. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed further than the rest. Just like any of the other new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Houston Cougars can be described as an armada, the top-seeded team as a hardcore as it gets, so it's no wonder they're expected to land a top seed in the tournament after their first season in the Big 12. The Tennessee Vols can be described as a pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have created a lane for themselves for claiming the top spot in the SEC. Player of the Year candidate Dalton Connect has carried the Vols all season and made them a team to watch in March. Lastly, the Utah State Aggies are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with their powerful performance against New Mexico, giving them their first outright Mountain West title in program history. They say, win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Aggies have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Lastly, mark your calendar for Locked On Basketball's Bracket Breakdown Show Monday, March 18th at 7 a.m. Our experts, Andy Patton and Isaac Shade, will break down their brackets and discuss everything you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on Monday, March 18th on Locked On College Basketball Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Is UConn a wagon? Can we call them that? Are they I don't think Nissan has a caravan, but I think UConn is the wagon. So I have to put that in there for our Locked On UConn purposes, and maybe we'll clip that. Yeah, UConn's a wagon to me. So but I love all those descriptions. It's actually a really great ad. So go Nissan, go get your SUVs anywhere you get your Nissans. But we're going to talk about the Big East era of, in your opinion, how would you rank the Big East era when it's from its inception to where it is now? Like, give me your kind of overview in your time as a fan and covering this sport.
Yeah. So, I don't want to say I'm younger because I just turned 30 this year, which everyone has reminded me of. So a lot of my early Big East memories are that, right before Kemba, like in that era of the Big East. And, that year that Kemba and UConn finishes 9th in the Big East, the rankings going into that tournament, Pittsburgh 4th, Notre Dame 5th, Syracuse 12th, Louisville 14th, St. John's 18th, West Virginia 22nd, UConn 10th.
Wow.
I mean, incredible depth in there. But I do think that this Big East does not always get the respect it deserves. Look at the top 10. And listen, I know that the AP poll is what the AP poll is. I'm not trying to say let's live and die by it. But look at the AP poll top 10. There are 3 teams from the Big East in there. This is an incredibly top-heavy conference this year. But last year, they had 5 teams ranked at different times. And there's only 11 teams in the Big East. It's not the same as when the Big 12 gets 5 of their 15 teams ranked.
Right. No, I was gonna say I think it makes a lot of sense. I think when you don't respect the Big East, it reminds me of, because we've talked about this. I'm from Meriden, but I live down in North Carolina now, and so ACC country here. Everybody is, the ACC is basketball country, etc. The ACC is down, but the top part of the league, there's still some good teams. I mean, listen, you can say what you want. The ACC tournament's on in my office right now. It's one of those things where I compare it to like the new version of the Big East, where it's still top heavy. You still have the UConn, Marquette, Creighton's. I mean, Seton Hall was great this year. Even though I don't want to give it to Providence fans because they're pains in the asses, but Providence is still a solid bubble team. Probably not going to get in, but whatever. Enjoy the NIT. I think there's some volition to kind of making that comparison, because all anyone wants to talk about down here is, last time Carolina was in the tournament, they went to the finals, right? And 2 years ago, Duke and Carolina played in the Final Four. So it really, I don't think it'll matter if, let's say, if UConn obviously is going to be there, knock on wood, and then obviously you have Creighton and Marquette having that opportunity. I think it more likely Creighton. If they got 2 teams in the Final Four, what are they going to say then?
And think about it. Last year, we should have had 2 teams in the Final Four. If Ryan Nembhard doesn't commit that foul at the end of the game, which was a foul, to be clear, they're in the Final Four. I mean, and if Tyler Kolek, I'll be honest, he gets a lot of stuff about, the way that he's kind of take on this villain role. He broke his thumb against Michigan State in the second game. Like, let's not pretend that Marquette couldn't have been right there too. Xavier went to the Sweet 16, and if Zach Fremantle was healthy, they could have been there too. Big East alive and well. I think that the requiem for the Big East that the ESPN pushed a little bit was it was very much premature, very much premature.
You just made me think of something. And it's something I talked to Aaron Torres about the national conversation around UConn being a defending national champion. Do you think that ESPN not having Big East games hurts the Big East in terms of just how they're perceived? Obviously, I think Fox does a good job of covering it, so don't get me wrong. But you don't hear a lot about, you still hear a lot about the Big Ten. So I have a hard time believing that's all of it. But do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I do think that ESPN has made their decisions, and I think ESPN has gotten hurt, maybe not just by the Big East, but by some of their decisions in general. So I do think it depends where you're tapped into your media. I'll be honest, I don't watch pretty much any ESPN. So I end up with just Big East stuff on my Twitter all the time because that's the algorithm. But I do think that, Fox doesn't get the ratings that ESPN does and stuff like that. So I think they made a decision that they were going to promote the Big 12 and the Big 10. And I think, one of the things I don't want to get on a soapbox here is people on Twitter, you have the power to, make these people think twice about it. Cause
Sure.
you shop with your legs, and we're just game day, for example, hadn't been to a Big East school in forever. Big East Twitter got in a huge stink about it. And then what happened? Game day showed up to the UConn Villanova game. This is not an accident. People are paying attention to, ratings drive everything. And if Big East is doing well, I promise ESPN's going to come calling.
Yeah. And the other thing too, is this is for your audience too, I'm sure. Anything you want Big East, the loudest minority gets their way. It's like that in politics. It's like that in corporate. It's like that in anything, because people are so afraid of making the wrong decision that they will cave to pressures, whether that is the truth or not. So if UConn Twitter wants UConn game day multiple times next year, just go after them, because they 100% will cave to you. That's just kind of that's the philosophy. It's the philosophy of big corporations. And you're right. I also think a part of me is, I'm about 13 years older than you. So I think, that's also kind of the difference in like how I perceive media. We're in the same boat. Like, we both have podcasts. I'm sure I consume the same amount of media that you do in different ways, but I still have that kind of old mentality of when I grew up. I mean, every game was on either, was the local station WTNH or WFNY, like, you know what I mean? So like those local channels, Bob Picozzi, like these like local legends that did these games, and then listening to Bill Raftery in the Big East. So I love to hear him on FS1. Still love me some John Fanta, is a brand new guy. So there's still kind of that hearkening back to wanting that nostalgia of some of the requiem of the Big East, playing Syracuse, like hoping that Georgetown actually gets better. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think there's some advantages and disadvantages of both. What is your favorite, not to get on my soapbox, but what is your favorite Big East moment? If you could give me like a tournament moment or just a moment that, like, something personal, because I feel like a lot of UConn fans have the same type of moments, but I gave a personal one to Aaron Torres going to a game. Is there one moment that stands out to you that probably is different than the rest of us?
Yeah. So it's different maybe in the way I consumed it personally.
Sure.
In 2013, we lost my grandfather, actually on the night that Shabazz Napier hit the buzzer beater against Florida.
Wow.
I didn't know that was happening. They were my grandfather and grandmother were diehard UConn fans. We came home, turned on the TV, because what else do you do in that situation? And there was a Shabazz Napier game winner. And I was in college. I came home every UConn tournament game to watch that tournament run with my grandma. And my grandmother was about 4'9" Italian woman screaming "Ball don't lie" at the TV, cheering on Niels Giffey and Shabazz Napier. And that tournament run will always be special to me. I know some people call it fluky, but I call it destiny in so many ways. Diehard UConn fans, my grandparents both were. So just to experience that, with them, was amazing. The other one that comes to mind is in 2011, I was senior in high school, and Kemba Walker was step back Walker, cardiac Kemba. And
yeah,
I think almost every high schooler in Connecticut either has the same experience, but everyone claims that they put it on in their classroom. And I can tell you that did happen. My civics teacher put it on in the classroom, and we watched Kemba hit the step back. So both of those moments stand out personally to me as like, and I'm a diehard UConn fan. So those are my two favorites.
Yeah, no, that's, well, first off, God bless your grandparents. It's amazing. The second thing I would say is there's one thing in common with North Carolina and Connecticut is during basketball season, everyone has that same story of during the ACC tournament, during the Big East tournament, you hear those stories of when I was a kid, they rolled that cart in and we watched, or they turned it on. Obviously kids now don't know about what the cart looks like and all that stuff, but we had that same experience. So, I appreciate that 100%.
Yeah. And now the teacher, I'm paying it forward, and I promise you, there will be a tournament game in my classroom playing in the background at the end of the day. So I'm paying it forward. So hopefully we can, keep that going.
I love it, man. Keep that tradition alive. What were your thoughts when they left? not to go from a positive to a negative, but I mean, when they went to the AAC, what was your initial thought?
Yeah, really confusing at the time because you're told UConn fans are telling me, we got kicked out, and Big East fans are saying they left willingly. There was some interest in the AAC at first because it was all new teams, Memphis and Houston and SMU. And it seemed like Cincinnati, it seemed like there were new opportunities for new rivals. And it just faded so quickly. Like I remember being excited in 2014, 2015. And by the time you got to 2016, 2017, and you're playing Tulane on a Tuesday night or Wichita State, and we're all having to get amped up for a Wichita State game and pretend this is the same. I mean, it just ended. I don't know who's responsible for the breakup originally. I'm so glad that UConn has decided to go back to the Big East. We are a Big East podcast. So
yeah. No, without a doubt.
It would really suck if they left.
It would definitely really suck. And maybe this we'll tease this for another time. If you ever come back on the show, what would happen to you as a Big East fan? I can answer it now. We can and we can maybe dive into it more. But what would you do if, because of football, because of conference realignment, UConn said, we got to go to the Big 12?
Yeah. I mean, personally, very personally, that would suck because we Big East Barroom, but diehard UConn fans. So my brother and I, Ryan, would probably have to have some long conversations. Do we want to watch a conference that doesn't have UConn? Or do we want to support a conference that does have UConn, but I'm not very much interested in their fan bases and their storylines and the people we've met and the players we've met. So I really hope UConn doesn't make that decision. I understand financially why they might, but I'm very much hoping that we can continue to kick that can down the road for a few more years because it just feels like home right now, the Big East.
Sure.
Hopefully we can add to the Big East. Why can't Syracuse come back if the ACC does implode? Why can't you bring a school back here and there and build the best basketball conference in the country?
Yeah, unfortunately, football pays the bills, I think, sometimes. So, we'll save that conversation for another day. We're going to break down the Big East tournament barroom style after this. Amazon Fire Stick was my intro into streaming. Almost everyone I knew that's my age, that was kind of our intro to anything from a streaming platform, because smart TVs didn't exist, right? You can take the little Fire Stick, you plug it in, and you have access to almost anything, right? So you don't need a Fire Stick anymore. You can still buy them, definitely can go get one. But Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels, deliver all the constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date and all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, whatever you want. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. Learn more. www.amazon.com, Locked On Fire TV. So you've been doing this podcast for how many years now?
Well, this is our second full season doing it.
Okay, awesome. So what do you guys ever do, like a bracket breakdown? Is there a specific way that you go about it? I wanted to kind of go through who you think has the best chances to win from the opening games, and also potentially talk about some sleepers. So give me what you got.
Yeah, so I guess if I was to do a quick plug, that would be we just did our Big East tournament preview podcast. Yep. We were lucky enough, 6 players, 5 media personalities came on, so that went out really well. But I did fill out a bracket. I don't know how in depth you want to go into these games or whatever, but I'm sure we probably have the same winner for both of us.
You could probably say that. Yeah, I think you would say that. I would tend to agree. I would imagine so. But why don't we start with let's just go for the first round games, the 3 that are coming up tonight, correct? Or what will be, we're taping this the day that they're coming out. It comes out tomorrow. Who do you got for Butler Xavier?
I'm going to pick Xavier. I like their guards, Davion McKnight, Quincy Oliveri, and Desmond Claude, New Haven native Desmond Claude.
Yep.
I think are really good. This Butler team has faded towards the end of this year. Xavier's had a disappointing year, but because of injuries more. So I'm going to go with the Xavier Musketeers, but this is a 1-point spread they have right now. So that's how close, everybody's seeing this game. coin flip, but I think Quincy Oliveri is one of the best players in the country that nobody talks about. He led the Big East in scoring for the entire season. So I'll go with Xavier.
Okay. How about the Ed Cooley Bowl? Who you got there?
These two next ones are easy. Providence. Georgetown won 0 games this year in the Big East because I refuse to acknowledge DePaul right now as a Big East team. So
that's great.
I will be taking the
I haven't heard
Providence.
anyone say that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I'll go Villanova DePaul. I'll go Villanova, and I don't think it'll be, even if it's a less than a 20-point game, I will be absolutely floored.
That's too funny. Before we get into the next one, I talk to my dad about UConn all the time. First game of the year, and he follows it, but he doesn't get as in depth with it. He goes, "Hey, how good is DePaul?" And I said, at this point, they had the opposite record, and they ended up having the opposite record of UConn for the year. I said, "You know how good UConn is?" I was like, "DePaul is the exact opposite, like almost the antithesis of them." He went, "They still have to play," and I said, "You don't have to worry about anything. Relax tonight. Have a glass of wine. You'll be fine."
Maybe the worst team to ever play Power 6 basketball. Like, not even exaggerating, like 315th in KenPom, and I'm like 335 or 40 teams. Like, the worst team to ever play in the Big East.
Brutal. I think we know where we're gonna go with the UConn game, so let's skip that. I think we all agree. Maybe I'm wrong. You tell me. The St. John's Seton Hall game for game of the quarterfinals. You think that's the best game?
Yeah, Marquette without Tyler Kolek to going down further will be closer because Marquette Villanova match up a little better without Kolek. Yeah, maybe I'm in the minority. I think Seton Hall is going to win this game. They've played 2 games. They've dominated 3 halves. They got dominated against St. John's and then came back and dominated the second half. So I'm going to go with Seton Hall wins this game going away. But you're playing at St. John's Home Arena, and last year, outside of, you could argue that St. John's gave Marquette the best game last year in the Big East tournament, and then Marquette won the Big East tournament.
Yeah, no, I think that's a coin flip game for me. I think in a previous episode with Sam Calhoun, we did a breakdown, and he brought up Rick Pitino as being kind of a good tournament coach, and in these kind of toss-up games, you could go either way, and we both lean Pitino for that reason. But to your point, I think I like Seton Hall. I think Shaw's doing a great job there. Also good to see him back in the Big East at his alma mater. So, if there was a team that I closeted would root for, if UConn somehow, lost the first round game, which I don't see that happening, it probably would be Seton Hall. A lot of Jersey love because I'm a Giants fan, so I know some good Seton Hall people. So happy to jump on that train with you there. So where do you see the semifinals? You got UConn, Seton Hall, you have Creighton, Marquette.
I have Creighton, Villanova.
Okay.
That's
me reasons why outside of Kolek, outside of him missing the game. Is there another reason why you think Villanova wins that game?
Yeah, and maybe I'm just into narratives here. Marquette's kind of given me this vibe this year that not that they don't care about the Big East, but that their real focus is for the NCAA tournament. They feel like they accomplished what they wanted to last year in the Big East.
Sure.
And their goal is to, get further in the NCAA tournament. They felt like they lost in the second round, and that wasn't fair to them. I think Villanova has about 5 seniors that are playing their last game, and they are playing absolutely desperate basketball. Justin Moore did not forget how to play basketball, one of the best players on a Final Four team before he tore his Achilles. Eric Dixon is an absolute monster. And Marquette doesn't have a lot of size, and Eric Dixon's really, really good. So, I wouldn't bet on this game, or I wouldn't bet Villanova money line, but I do think that the Villanova Wildcats have the recipe to upset the Marquette Golden Eagles.
Listen, if there's another passionate fan base, I'm going to weave in a little ad here. So apologies, shameless plug, but eBay, passion, drive, and patience. I think Villanova has that as well. And they probably mirror that with UConn. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. only for U.S. customers. Back to the Big East final. You got UConn and Seton Hall. Obviously, you're picking UConn. I don't even think we need to dive too much into that.
That game scares me just because of what Seton Hall did to UConn at Seton Hall. I mean, they're one of the two teams that beat UConn this year.
Do you take stock into, Tyler, that and I know they weren't playing great that game, into the fact that was a game where DC went out. Like, so Donovan hurts his foot, he's out, ends up not being out for the next 5 games. Do you take any stock in the fact that they almost didn't really know how to play without him at that point? So if he does get in foul trouble, they can manage. They're not as good. It's not as impactful on the defensive end, but they've figured it out. You don't want to lose them, but do you take any stock in that? Scare you any less?
Mark, I think that's a great point, because you're right. They didn't know what Donovan Clingan was, their anchor. And I think, you know what, you're right, that if he goes out, it's just Seton Hall. I say this very lovingly to Seton Hall. They're not interested always in playing basketball. They're more, it's a fist fight that's going on during the game.
Yeah.
And you get a guy in foul trouble. You get a guy like Kadari Richmond to go off, which he's done against UConn before. I'm not saying that I would pick an upset. UConn will be probably double-digit favorites, no matter who they play. But I think Seton Hall scares me the second most of any team in this tournament.
Fair enough. Who are they playing in the final? Who's UConn playing in the final?
They're going to play the Creighton Blue Jays, in my opinion. I think Creighton is playing their best basketball of the season. And everything we said about Tristen Newton at the top of the show, I promise you Greg McDermott is telling Baylor Shireman right now and saying, hey, you should be the player of the year. You averaged 18-8, and you're really good, and you shot 43% from 3.
Yeah, you're probably right. And he's probably doing it in a really nice way, because Greg McDermott is like the nicest guy in the world. He's just like, we're playing well. I guess we're doing okay. Like, he's perfect for them. Let's put it that way. And it's not a slight against people in Omaha, but it's just, I don't think that would play well in the Northeast.
I agree.
See a certain type of grit we want. Tell people where we can find your stuff. Obviously, your handle's on there on X, but talk to people about Big East Barroom and where we can find you before we wrap it up.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, my brother and I, Ryan, we host a podcast called Big East Barroom. We're all over. We're on Twitter, but Ryan has his own Twitter, Ryan Cassidy, CBB. So feel free to go follow him. We're on Spotify. We are on Apple Podcasts. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us. And we appreciate the support. And Mark, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on. You have a great setup here. So this is awesome.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate it. I'm available for you guys if you ever need me going forward for anything. If you need me to jump on for a quick guest or guest spot, I'm here for you. And you obviously both have an open invitation to come back on Locked On UConn for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate
you. Locked On has a few more things we want to tell you. We've launched a first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV. The free Fire TV channels app, Locked On Shows in Sports Today, 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the Fire TV channels app. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For my guest, Tyler Cassidy, I am Mark Zanetto. This has been Locked On UConn. As always, peace, love, and go Huskies.